All right. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another Monday LinkedIn Live. I think my man Michael's joining now. Let's see if he's back. But today, what we're going to talk about is not just sales, but really like coaching, teaching, mentoring, what goes into being, we'll talk about manager, leader, all that stuff, right? I think because there's a lot of different definitions out there. I know something that Michael's super passionate about is leadership and coaching and hiring and everything that goes into kind of building a world-class org. So from our side, what we'll try to do is get into some of the definitions, talk about what we're seeing kind of in the market, like what people are doing, what's working, what's not working, and then, turn it over for some good old Q&A. So, as usual, everyone, a couple of kind of like housekeeping options. Make sure to, one, drop your questions in the comments. So make sure you have a question, you like something that you heard, make sure to hit the like button. I like the like buttons. I don't know what Michael likes yet. I'll have to ask him. But if you guys hear something that you really like or you really enjoy, let me know, because I know, as we're going through things, we can kind of double click there. Just let us know, hey, like keep going a little bit deeper there. So either of those things are perfectly okay. So we're waiting for Michael. I think he's going to join like right now. All right, there we go. What's up, dude?
Hey, how's it going?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, good. All right, man. That's why you can't wing it, bro. You got to actually like click the link ahead of time. All right, cool, man. So look, we're going to be talking, I think, like coaching, right? Talk about the difference between kind of coaching, teaching. I did a post this morning about it. I know coaching is something that you're super, super passionate about. Have you done LinkedIn Live before? Is this your first?
I've done one in the past, yeah.
Okay, cool, man. All right. So we'll go deep on, again, maybe a few different areas. If there's anything that you want to get into, like we'll double click, kind of into it a little bit further. Usually I like to make this as Q&A as possible. So I'll have kind of like a list of questions like teed up over here. I've got some to kind of get things jump started. And then again, everyone, make sure to drop your questions in the comments, whether you're a rep who's trying to make that leap to leadership and understand what that actually looks like, whether you're a frontline leader or you're a VP of sales. Coaching and building individuals is the name of the game. And that's, there's so much of it that's, that we kind of take for granted, or that people think is like more, more like intuition versus skill, when it's not. Almost every great coach or every, kind of great leader like gets there through like formulaic and through learning and through a lot of things. So as this goes on, again, make sure to drop your questions in there. So one of the first questions I've got for you, man, is, how would you define coaching, right? Like for you, like how would you define like the act of coaching? Like, what does it mean to you? Like, how have you seen it be successful or unsuccessful? Because I think that this is the first piece where a lot of people have this twisted, where a lot of people don't quite understand, like, what is coaching, versus leading or mentoring or some of these other things. So I'd love to get maybe your definition, and then I'll kind of jump in with like my own 2 cents on it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So coaching for me is that one-on-one interaction with the reps that really helps them move the needle and improve. And it's really for me that customized coaching is that one-on-one interaction that helps that specific individual get better on the things that they need to improve. And it differs in training, whereas like training tends to be more like curriculum based, that is the how to do something, whereas the coaching is really that one-on-one that progresses them further in their careers. And for me has been the critical thing in my own career and in the reps that I've led.
But what goes into like a coaching conversation? You know what I mean? Like a coaching conversation versus a like performance management conversation versus a shoot the shit session. Because I think a lot of leaders don't quite understand the difference between those. That they call it's real easy to call everyone a coaching session. Like, let's just call it what it is. Like, what's different? You know what I mean? Like, what do you see that's different, whether it's what you do or what other great people have done, for you from a coaching standpoint?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is making sure that the reps can absorb and then apply what they have learned. And so for me, that's a really big aspect of coaching is, yeah, you can teach curriculum, but really understanding and calibrating with that specific person that they can really understand and apply what they've learned. It's really easy to go into a one-on-one and not really have clear expectations on what's like actually been accomplished, but really diving deep and learning and asking the right questions to the rep to make sure that they fundamentally understand what you're trying to teach. It differs from pipeline in that, pipeline, you review forecasting numbers, you review what specifically is going on with each specific deal. Coaching is how they can actually do something, get better at the job, and improve as a person and an employee. So that's kind of how I think about it. And calibrating with them is the tool that I use to make sure that they really understand the concepts that are being taught.
Yeah, I love that. I think and you brought up something I think that's really important. I think a lot, like you brought up questions, right? And I think that's the key to like great coaching is as opposed to giving advice. And I think a lot of people get those two things mixed up. That the key to great coaching is the ability to ask the right questions versus having to have all the right answers, and letting them go down a path, and versus trying to always direct down a path. I feel like that's something that I've consistently seen, is that I feel like good coaches are letting people you let people guide a little bit, you kind of move them, but at the end of the day, you don't try to push your agenda on them. And so I think that's just a critical point. It's about like great questioning. And the other thing that you brought up, I think that's right, is it's about the person. That I think most leaders, and you can kind of give your 2 cents on this, their definition of coaching is deal coaching. That they are focused on coaching to a deal as opposed to the skills of that person, and having that time dedicated to the skills of that person versus versus like, hey, that's great. Yeah. Hey, I coached the shit out of you. Like, I help you close that deal. Right. And so like, again, like, how do you look at, whether it's your team now or your previous teams, how do you look at the difference between like deal coaching and skills coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's basically 2 types of coaching, and it's indirective and directive coaching, which you were getting at there. With the indirective coaching has been far more effective for me when you're asking the right questions to teach your people how to think, and ultimately like hopping on a deal and helping them is important in many cases and examples over my career. But it's important in the sense of you show them how it's being done so that they can then later on do it themselves. And I found that through indirective coaching, by asking the right questions that get them to think, like literally asking them, what do you think about this? How would you solve this situation? What if the prospect did this? And diving really, really deep with them is super important. And when you are hopping on those deals, it's not to claim glory, it's to teach your reps, okay, this is how I did it. Do you feel that you could handle that? And then make sure that they're able to do it on their own the next time. I have seen those situations where sales leaders, will coach to like a specific deal, which is really, really critical.
Yeah.
But it's so that they can grasp it and then do it on their own later. And that's the piece that I think is fundamentally important, that often is overlooked.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's too, like, volume of coaching, right? Like, I feel like, again, like we've all been in those call reviews or those where people are either doing one of 2 things, either volume or vagueness of coaching, where like my favorite one is like, be more curious. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? Like, Jake, you gotta focus on building rapport. Like, what? Like how like, okay. Right. So what I see is that great leaders are good at breaking it into like the actions observed. Where it's like, hey, on these 3 sections, and I've listened to your last 3 calls, we stopped at the surface and didn't go deeper. And so the area that we want to focus on is, again, kind of diving into more of their challenges or whatever that might looks like. So on our next call, that's what we're going to listen for, as opposed to you got to be more, like advice, here's what I did, etc. And then the other thing is volume, that I feel like a lot of leaders give so much volume of feedback. It's this fourth, like, oh yeah, Jake, so we should do this, and the reps like, what? Like, okay, great. And then they just kind of like do it. So those are my big things, is that in coaching, specificity is so important, and meeting people where they're at from a volume, and not just coaching to every small thing versus patterns of behaviors is how I look at that. Really like how I think about it.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I wrote something about this a while back. I think the phrase that I was attacking in that specific moment was add more value. It is, to me, it's like the most overused phrase in sales today. I just remember being like a 23-year-old sitting in the office, and like my manager walking up to me and was just like, dude, like, add more value on your calls. And I was like, well, A, that's very broy of you, and B, I have no idea what you want me to do. And so, and I hear things like that all of the time. So I'm like, very like conventional, vague term that doesn't tell the reps exactly what to do to improve. The alternative approach, I think you hit on the head, like exactly. And I wish I saw like in every coaching interaction, is specificity. One of my favorite ways to get really specific and just remind myself to do that is focusing in on the specific questions that the reps are asking to achieve the outcome that they need to achieve. So if they ask a question that is maybe vague on their end, or doesn't achieve the outcome that they need to, particularly in discovery, I kind of phrase the question back to them like, how could we have worded this a little bit different to get the answer that we wanted? I love doing that in coaching because it forces me to get really specific, and it also gets the rep to get really specific too. And for us at Chili Piper, it has been a game changer, both in terms of rep development and actual revenues. I mean, you can literally see it in the revenue numbers, the effect that being specific. And the other thing that I'll add to that is being specific, but also everyone needs to know what criteria they're being like measured on. Like, what am I supposed to do in discovery, or at this part of the call, or at another part of the call? So one of the things that's really helped me in coaching the team is like call scoring. And I always think that things like that are really important, because having that structure enables you to be like super hyper specific, like with them. Like, okay, at Chili Piper, like we really focus on, there's always that discussion about like logic versus like emotion in sales. So we really focus on the emotional element, and we line up our questions to do that in discovery. And all of that is like very important in order to uncover like the specific pain points or problems that prospects are facing. And it really is a much more buyer centric approach, and a better experience for the buyer as well. So it's not something that we just like do in vain. It has real revenue implications, and real implications for our buyers.
Yeah. And again, I think that what we're kind of both nailing on here is that coaching, you have to really constantly evaluate yourself as a leader too. You have to just go and look at, and we've all been guilty of it. You've done it, I've done it, right? Where you think you're being specific, and then, when you kind of go back and watch your own film, and look at yourself, you're like, oh God, like, okay, I see where this went south now. Like, I actually could have done better. Whenever it comes to giving like that feedback. So we've got a question here from Kobe Bergman. What's up, Kobe? Again, everyone, make sure drop your questions kind of in the comments here. We're going to try to get through all of them over the next 20, 30 minutes or so. And again, if you like something that Michael says, make sure to hit, I don't know, the hand clap? Is that it? Is that for you?
Yeah,
the hand clap? Hand clap? All right.
All
right. Or like the thinking man, like one. I always make a comment about it because like the LinkedIn emojis look like they're drawn in like an old felt pen. They're kind of like rough edges. I feel like they're getting cleaner now. I'm like looking at it. So again, if you hear something you like, hit the like button. It just lets us know. Like we'll kind of keep going on that thread. So Kobe asked a question. He said, I found that to coach without asking questions that come across as leading, right? Which this is so critical. I need to assume I don't have the best answers. The goal isn't to fix the person, right? As a part of that. It's tough to get in this mental space though. So thoughts, guidance on this. So if I could paraphrase, I think it's like, we all come into conversations with our own biases. I've now talked to Michael 5 different times. I'm like, come on, Michael, like, damn it, we talked about the same thing. But we all have this, right? It's tough to get that like mental clarity. So are there any things that for you as a leader or leaders of leaders that you think about or even prime yourself when you go into conversation? One, to like not have an agenda, not have the mind space of thinking my job is to like fix you. And kind of be that like proactive listener. I think Michael might have froze. Looks like he froze. So we'll hop in. If Michael's froze, it's all right. We'll come back to it. So Kobe, I'll try to give you my 2 cents on this of like what I've seen is it has to be about prep. That I can tell you time and time and time again that if you don't take the time to prep ahead of the conversation and you just roll from conversation to conversation, this will continue to be an issue, right? That you will continue. You've got to make a very conscious effort to not want to jump in to the conversation, right? You've got to make a very conscious effort to want to kind of be present for that person and be very cognizant of like what that person is going to be feeling, and knowing that your goal is not to fix the person. So that's my kind of like big 2 cents here, is to make sure that you really focus on like preparing for the meeting and then not having an agenda going into it, because that's what they'll feel, as opposed to going in and just like winging it. So, all right, dude, I think you're back.
Can you hear me?
Hey, Kara, it says right now that he's still backstage, but I can see him on LinkedIn Live. Can you hear me, Michael?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
All right. I think you're live, dude. I think it's back live. I don't know what happened. So anyway, the question he was asking was just about like getting in the right headspace. I just basically shared that, for me, it's about prep. That you're going to go into a coaching meeting, prep ahead of time. Stop showing up and winging it. That the reason that so many of your coaching conversations go south is that you just don't put in the mental energy or the time to like, hey, I'm going to have a conversation with Michael about this. I'm going to like write some things down ahead of time, and I'm going to be prepared, and I'm going to look at my notes from our last conversation. So for me, that's my number one advice about how to not get caught up in that mindset, is to just make sure that you're doing a really good job of just like mentally, emotionally getting in the right place, and then mentally like doing that prep that you have to do.
Yeah. I think that's great. One of the things I know is like send like a follow-up email, and then that enables you to, I also use a tool that delays like an email. So if we're having a discussion in like a one-on-one, you can delay the email for like a couple of days later. It's more so for me to like follow up on whatever it was we discussed in that one-on-one, make sure that it was acted on, and then we make sure that it was done in the next one-on-one. That is like an absolutely critical thing for skill building, because you want to make the skill conscious until it becomes unconscious and they're just like doing it, and then you move on to the next like skill, the whole like unconscious competence versus like consciously competent on something. Yeah. So that's really important for me. The other thing our CEO shared with us, Daniel Kahneman is like a famous like researcher in the area of like persuasion, and he it's a really good like podcast he did recently, and it was if you want the behavior of an individual, a really good way to do it is to ask why they're like not doing it already. And for me, that's like really important, and it's actually been a really great idea for idea generation from the sales team. So I try to not always assume that I have the answer, unless it's just like blatantly obvious that like, hey, you need to make a certain level of phone calls, or you need to do this to be successful. But when it comes to like the deeper things, like you hire people for the right reasons because they're so smart, intelligent, they know they have a baseline skill set. So why not lean on them too? Like a lot of times they can be your allies in problem solving. And then when people feel invested and feel like they're a part of the solution, they're more likely to do it. They're more likely to actually do the behavior that you're seeking out. And then if they feel like they were a part of the decision to begin with. And so in the coaching session that I do, I try to really get people thinking with me. And it's not so much like top-down approach, but like, hey, we ran into this issue. What do you think about that? So for me, that's been like hugely critical. Just like as a coach, I got a lot more out of people when I took that approach rather than like a top-down approach.
Yeah, where you have the advice. And I think like and for me, I'll tell you what I think, a lot of it is speed, dude. It's like it feels like it takes longer to ask questions versus just give the answer, because like well, the funny part is you know what your answer is. You know what you think the right answer is. And I know shit. I mean, I think like I catch myself doing that. Like we all do. You know what I mean? Like especially when you're stressed. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's why I think like, your idea of you delay the email or things like that. One thing I did want to ask, that this is super tactical and we've got like 4 or 5 questions too. I've heard both ways about making them send the recap or you send it. You said you send it, right? Mm-hmm. Why do you send it? Why do you think it's important for you send it versus having them send it? Or have you tried it both ways?
Yeah, I have tried it both ways. I want the team to know that like I am very committed to their coaching and training, and like for me, I want that to be like sort of center of the room, that like that is the thing that's most important to me, is like your coaching, training, and development. So like little things like that are actually really important that I do, and each company is very different. When we onboard new employees, I make it very abundantly clear that if you ever need time on anything coaching related or otherwise, just throw time in my calendar. Like just like little things like that, I think are really important.
Yeah.
The number one thing I hear from just sales reps when I'm interviewing them, like why they're leaving their companies, is growth. And it's very obvious that companies are under delivering in this area. And it really is a true passion of mine, and watching people get better in their careers, and, going back and, talking to them years later, and hey, that extra investment and time that you made for me, like really helped me change income brackets and like be a good performer. Like that's what I live for. And so while these things seem like really small, they're really important to me to like let the reps know that like I'm really committed to this. The other thing is like for accuracy as well, is just like another reason. I found that like I could just like quickly put together my thoughts, shoot them out, they agree, and then we take those next action. It's just been like a speed issue as well for skill building for me. It works for me. I'm always open to other ideas, and I've definitely heard other models, but over the years, that's what I found to be most effective.
Yeah, I feel you. I get it, because you're saying like, look, dude, I'm invested in you, right? And I think the counter argument some people make is like it puts more of it on them. But I totally see from like a rep standpoint, I think it's tough. I don't know if there's a right answer for this one. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I just like you see, I don't know, like benefits to both sides. So, all right. So we've got Julian Moreno. What's going on, Julian? How are things over at Cloud Task? I think they're down in Medellin or something. So it's probably a lot better than it is. I don't know. It's going to be like 29 in Austin today, like tonight, 29 degrees. Yeah, it's wild. So what's the best way, in your opinion, to measure the impact of the coaching process on KPIs that matter the most? Of course, this to me is, I feel like, I don't know. I'll give my 2 cents. I feel like this question is the fundamental issue with consulting. It's a good question, Julian, because I think it's how every leader thinks, or not every, lots of sales leaders think, that you have KPIs, and it's not that you shouldn't be thinking about the long term. How I look at this is like your KPIs are your measurement of these short-term results. Your coaching and your skill building, and by the way, we're not talking about deal coaching, right? Deal coaching is a mix of both, right? But this skill building is, look, none of you got into leadership to manage that team for 6 months. And so I know, look, if I've got to manage this team or manage directors or even manage VPs, I'm in this for the long game. So I've got to invest in this. I'm gonna have to deal with, Dean and Jake for, 2 years. So I've got to invest in them. And I feel like as a leader, that is what I feel like too many leaders right now are too focused. They're spending 90% of their time in the deal and 90% of their time on the KPIs and 10% on the people. And we've got to flip it. If you invest in the humans, like, I mean, look, you called it out. Your guys' numbers have taken off, like, because you invest in the people, not just the deal. So for me, it's like, you can look at the KPIs that matter, and different coaching to different things will impact different people's KPIs. But you also have to just, I think, a little bit of gut or into like know that if you invest in your people, the results will come. I feel like as a leader, you kind of have to have that mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not totally against, like, to me, like, KPIs are radar, right? And radar doesn't like, it doesn't like establish like the cause and effect relationship between like what's going on and actual like results. And so if it's your radar, it can only tell you like, oh, things are going well, things are not going well, but it doesn't tell you why. It doesn't say like who's doing well, like, and the underlying reasons why. I think first you have to understand why, and then you have to align that to your KPIs. And so that's like what we've done internally here is like, okay, like this email works. Why does this email work? This phrasing on this call works. Why does that work? These are the processes that we have in place. And so many leaders I talk to literally don't know why they do the processes that they do. And I'm constantly baffled by that fact. And then you go back and you align the behaviors that you want from the team to the KPIs that you're seeking out, and not the other way around. I think that's like a very crucial step. That's why I mentioned the call scoring like so early on. Yeah. When I gave a talk on this, there's a couple hundred people in the room, and I asked how many people were like scoring their calls, for example, and one person in the entire room like raised their hand. So it's like, yeah, we're measuring KPIs, but is it on the right things? So I really think that that's a really fundamental concept. And as far as KPIs go, after 1 month of coaching, you could literally see like reps that weren't performing very well, like take off and like literally had one rep that was like had 0 on the board 1 month and then was the top performer the next month after a very customized coaching program specific to that person. I don't know how much more KPI driven you can be than that example. But I think you hit the nail on the head. You absolutely have to invest in the people. And if not, they will go elsewhere. It's the number one reason why people are leaving.
Yeah, but I think but again, I think other managers like you and I hear that people are leaving because of professional development, and therefore the answer is skills building and coaching. Other people hear that exact same thing. People are leaving and they think it's more about deal coaching. Mm-hmm. Like I know it, man. I talk to enough sales leaders, that they think like, but I'm coaching, I'm giving Jake feedback. Like I'm coaching him. Like, dude, you're giving me feedback. Think about there's 3 people in a deal coaching. There's the person, you, and the deal. You're coaching the deal. Mm-hmm. You're not coaching Susan. Mm-hmm. You're coaching how to get the deal done. Mm-hmm. And you've got to separate that. Like deal coaching is totally fine. Totally fine. But if you don't have dedicated time to coaching the individual, it's again, like you're going to lose people. They're not going to feel developed. They're going to feel like they're just, again, like a deal person. Yeah. And or you nurture dependency, which is the other thing. And like, I know I've done this in my past where I've had reps who could get to quota, but they always needed dad. Dad always had to give in the last mile, because I nurtured dependency. I didn't ask enough questions. I gave too much advice, So like I've seen it on all ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, I think that's a really overlooked concept. It's like you got to take the training wheels off, like at some point. And I think I try to like visualize that. Like, can this person take this deal and like be able to work this like enterprise account with this very famous company and all these like very particular stakeholders on their own? And like, if you coach like that, it'll change the way that you're coaching. Like, pretend like you can't get on a deal and they have to run the deal by themselves. Like that, it'll really quickly make you change how you approach your coaching. And I think that that's a very overlooked concept just as a whole in this area. Companies aren't doing it coaching enough. And then when they are, you're right. Like they're doing it on specific deals. And both of those are really at the detriment of the individuals that they're trying to serve.
Yeah, we just did a session. Actually, I did it for like 6 people in our like account management partnerships team. Yeah, I love account strategy. It's like one of my favorite things like in the sales world. And, as a part of it is like we walk through this like account plan template. And, what I've done is I've always broken out account strategy into its own one-on-one once a month. And so once a month, it's like you bring the 4 deals, you put together your account strategy and we work it together. And then that allows them, then I'm working on the skill building of account strategy versus the deal. And I found that to be a really effective way to get people to solve their own problems and challenges. And I'm providing kind of this template, but they're having to put it in. And then it's something we can go back and reference. So I feel like you can do the deal coaching, but you have to make sure you're helping the person get better, not just for the deal, like that there's other things. So, all right, this is cool. All right, we got a bunch more questions coming in. So let's go top of the funnel. I know like interviewing and hiring is something that you're into too. So there's a couple questions. So Sahil Advani had a question. He said, in an interview process, how do you actually assess if that salesperson is going to deliver results? I mean, shit, dude, that's like a whole long thing. Like what questions to ask? That was his. But I think you could probably expand on that too. Like, how do you think about both the interview questions that you found successful to find people that have a higher likelihood to hit? And then how do you think about all of the things that we've been talking about in like the hiring process? I think Michael might have froze again. All right, so I'll jump in. All right, so questions around the interview process and coachability. I think every single sales leader I've ever experienced says coachability is something that's important to them. I don't think I've ever met a sales leader that has said coachability is not important, that they don't look at it. So to me, it's the track record and it's talking to their previous leaders. Meaning the most important thing that I found in a predictor to success is that I ask them, when I talk to your boss at XYZ, what's their name? How are they going to rate you on a scale of 1 to 10 around XYZ? And then I look for the patterns of behavior on if like they're coachable or not. And so for me, I feel like the easiest way I've found to see if people are coachable or not coachable is how their ability to actually take feedback and how their previous leaders talk about them. So Michael, I was just getting into like some of the questions around hiring. I was just giving, for me in the interview process, the way that I do it is I have a very specific question that I got from the book Who. I don't know if you've read Who before. It's by Jeff Smart. Him and his dad wrote like these Power Score. They've got like all these books and we've modeled a lot of our interview process. But the question is like, when I talk to your boss at this role, specific role, how do you spell their name? John Smith. Okay. How are they going to rate you on a scale of 1 to 10 and why? What are they going to say that you were great at or world class at? What will they say that that they are working with you on? When you do that, it changes the whole dynamic of like, hey, so how would your boss rate you on coachability? Or how would this work? And people are like, oh, killed it. Best ever. As opposed to if I ask like what your boss would say, or like when I talk to them, it just changes it. So I've been effective in the interview process by trying to make it less theoretical and more, what will they say? Yeah. And that I find gets a much more live answer. But what have you found? And also in like hiring and onboarding, like in taking in the coaching piece, like how do you think about interviewing, hiring, onboarding? Like what's worked for you? What hasn't worked for you?
Yeah, I have a lot of sort of opinions in this area, very, very strong ones, because I think about coaching a lot in the interview process, and also, you typically assess for a baseline of skills, and then I kind of like hear like culture fit. Like, I'm not sure that people really have what that definition is from company to company, but usually it's like skills and like culture fit. The way that we assess it at Chili Piper, we try to be like much more empirical. So we give them things that they need to actually do in the interview process to assess whether they could do X activity or not. So I think a lot of people like know what the right things to say in sales are, and you have to be really careful about that, because most people, I've talked to people who have never done sales that gave me the quote unquote right answers when it came to sales, and then I was like, wait a minute here, like this isn't the best way to assess people. Like, this person I don't know if they can close it. They've never closed a deal in their life, but they know what to say. That's what you have to be careful for. Is most people in the interview process, like, are saying all the right things, but then if you actually try to get them to do it, like, these are skills that you have to have in order to be able to close deals repeatedly and bring in revenue. And that's a very important concept. Yeah. And so one of the things that we do is we, as a part of my interview, each person in the company has a different sort of role in the interview process. But as a part of mine, I do a role play, and then I ask them exactly what you just said, like self-scoring. Like, on a scale from 1 to 10, what would you do, or how would you score yourself? And then I ask them a really critical question, which is, okay, so what would you have done differently to bring it to a 10? So if they say a 7, and then usually it's always very like, well, if you only gave me more information, then I would have done better. I'm so shocked all the time when people say that, but you should try the exercise at least once within your company.
I love it.
Ask that question. And then I try to give them, I'm a big fan of giving them specific feedback and then asking them to implement it and do the role play again. People don't like it, but it's a good like assessment criteria. It's not perfect. Like, I still haven't found that silver bullet out there, but I found it to be much better than winging it and assessing people just on like questions alone without having them to actually do anything. So I would say do something that gets in this area of making them actually be coachable in your interview process. And if you're already assessing for baseline skills, like through a role play, which I think a lot of companies do, like, you might as well add that in there as well. It's not that much extra time. But you want to sort of see that, do they have this like to me worldview, or do they have this like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to try to get better. And you can pretty easily assess for that. And so we try to hire, people like that at Chili Piper. And I've been happiest with my hiring decisions taking on this approach.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, don't ask the question like, do you like to be coached, or, have you been it's usually the people who think that they like to be coached the most are actually the people who don't want to be coached the most. It's like,
very true.
It's the people who are like self-deprecating, be like, look, like, I think I've had skills here, but I know that I have like this, and this. I also look for specificity in the gap. Yeah. Do they know where they're at? Like, that's why I like your self-assessment. Like, I think consistently what I hear is that a lot of people do that. It's like that double role play. And I've heard that a lot from people, that ability to like, here's what it is. Here's, you have the same information everyone has. Cool. How would you assess yourself? I actually like that. I like, how would you do it? Cool. Great. What do you think? Okay, cool. Let's do that differently next time. And like, let them kind of own it. I like that idea. So Jeremy Mills, he asked a follow-up question to something we had talked about, which is like, and when I started to talk about it, like coaching to behaviors and KPIs, he said, how do you go about building long-term behaviors that will lead to results in the long run? So I'll give my, and I don't know if this is something that you do or not. So with a lot of our clients, and especially mid-sized clients, and well, everyone should be doing it. Like, there's two very different things to think about. There are skills and there's a methodology, and they're different things. And for our clients, like, we work on like sales behaviors. So we're developing not just the process and methodology, we're developing like, what are the 8 behaviors it takes to be successful at your org? And like, and it's custom. I mean, like, there's kind of these universal ones, and where do they show up in the process? But for me, if you don't have defined behavior sets, whether it's, behavior skills and then behaviors within like, micro behaviors, you're not going to have a common framework for leadership. You're not going to have a common framework for when people go between teams, and people again are going to be chasing ambiguity. Like being more curious. So for me, I think every organization, and I get when you have 5 people, maybe it feels like too much, but once you start to scale, you need to have the behaviors that it takes to be successful, not just the methodology, not just how we say it, right? And so that's how I do it. It's very purposeful, written sales, competencies, behaviors, skills, and not too many of them. That you can go back and reference that are universal. Everyone on our team knows what, getting to decision makers means, if that's a behavior that's important to your sale, right? Or getting to the right people, or buyer circle, or whatever the hell it is, right? Like, so that to me is something I think that I've had success with, is just more structure around the skills and being very deliberate about what those skills are.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I was at a conference a couple months back, and there wasn't a ton of people in the room, but I wish there had been. And this presenter got up there, and he was basically showing statistics on like millions of interactions with like top performers and against the rest of the stack, and they were observing behavior. It was out of a sales institute in Florida, and what they found was that the reps that were like kind of listening to their managers least were performing the best. And asking questions about KPIs earlier, I don't know how like much more misaligned you can be than that. And I really thought about it for a minute, and then he went into sales methodologies, and it's because we're so prescriptive with how we teach these methodologies that we forget that what the methodology was created to do to begin with, which is build skills so that you can close deals that need to be tied to revenue. So
that's it, man.
You just take a step back and think about that. I think it changes the way you coach. So make sure that the behaviors that you're coaching to, and that, it's fine to have a sales methodology. There's one in particular I remember doing my manager did a training on this particular book, and it was a light bulb moment for me. And I just really, at a time in my career where I was really young and I needed that light bulb moment, and her doing this training, I still talk about it, 10 years later, it was such a critical moment for me. And it was from a sales methodology. But that particular methodology, it's sort of like, it enabled me to think about sales in the right way and head in the right direction, so that I can then figure out these sort of micro situations on my own. But that's the way you have to think about it, is like each situation and interaction is different in a sales environment. And thus you need the skill set to be able to deal with that and not have these like broad overarching things that you apply in every situation. So I have a deep appreciation for sales methodologies, but I think we're in this area where we're being very, very prescriptive about how we apply them. And like, just take a step back and be like, why are we teaching this to begin with? And it will really empower both you as a rep who's absorbing that information, and as a leader who's trying to inspire other people. Like, that's fundamentally crucial to people development.
Yeah, dude. I equate it to like the methodology is like trimming the tree, and like the skills is like making the roots healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Like you overinvest your time. You can choose to invest your time however you want, right? You can constantly be up there trimming the tree, and then this branch goes longer, or you can just make the tree healthier.
Yeah.
Or help to nurture the tree, and give it more water and, fertilizer and stuff. And it goes back to, it's just, I think a lot of it's just, I was really lucky. I didn't realize it at the time. When I got my first leadership job at a more established company. And so I got leadership training and development and all these things. And I feel like, now that I spend most of my time in like the rapid growth world, it's like, we feel like we can't take the time to do it, but you have to. And then we wonder why, attrition is so high and people aren't loyal, and they're chasing the dollar in Silicon Valley. It's like, no, man, they're chasing like someone who cares about them. That's what they're chasing. They're not chasing like an extra 20K. I mean, don't get me wrong, some people are, right? But like, I feel like we've just gone so far left. And that's the cool part though, is like, if you can just create a culture like that where people know that you're invested, like you win. Like you retain people, they bring more of their friends in. And it's like, it's a win-win. And I'm sure it sounds like you've been able to do that a lot at Chili Piper.
Yeah, I think like if you put coaching and training at the center of everything you do, like now we're talking about culture. Like everything else that, the free food in the office and the ping pong table is like, people see right through that stuff now. It's
right.
almost
like level set, right? Everyone's got that shit.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it on the head. Like people want someone that care about them and their growth and development. And if you can do that, like you are going to build the most badass sales team or any team on the planet. If you can get that right and just know that the team feels like you have their back, and that feeling like within the team, you can really instill that and do so by placing coaching and training at the center of your culture. Everything else will fall into place. You'll get so much more out of them than if you add $50,000 to their paycheck. I know that sounds crazy, but you really will. And I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen reps go the extra mile for leaders making a lot less than they could somewhere else. And I think like, the finances are important, but once someone is like comfortable with their wages, like I think that the return there can be a little bit diminishing. And so you really have to be to place the coaching element at the center of everything that you're doing.
Yeah, and that and not just like during that one point in time when they like join your team or your company, which is what I mean most are. So,
Yeah.
All right, a couple follow-ups here. So we'll do probably a couple more questions in.
Okay.
And let's see, best way to measure the level of coaching delivery of your sales coaches. So Julian asked a follow-up question. He said, what's the best way to measure the level of coaching delivery of your sales coaches? I mean, I think, look, you gave the answer. It's like results, right? But I think the key, like what we found through our work with companies is different behaviors and skills are more or less relevant at different parts of the sales process.
Yes.
And so I look at it more as like for Susan, it's that she improved at her deal conversion from stage 2 to stage 3. Richard, he increased his close ratio by 7%. So I feel like it's very to the individual, but the types of things, and you hit it on the head. You talked about this, like deal size, conversion percentages, and sales cycle length. Like those are kind of like, but where it manifests is different between Susan and Richard and Julian and Kobe. So, but I think that's important versus like macro, the whole team has done blah. Now, maybe there are some just like massive skill gaps, but I just don't ever think about it that way.
Yeah, I think you have to, like as a leader, like you have to know why people are, what's going on. Like, why is one person underperforming versus why someone else is performing? And just that simple act alone we don't really do like performance plans. I think they're like outdated personally. Like it's very 1990s to me. So we do it a little bit differently. Like if someone's behind, I know this is crazy, but we actually try to help them get better. It's not just like, oh, you're on a PIP. If you don't get off of it, then you're gone. And we have turned around every single person that has like been on our equivalent of what that is. And I am, of all the things I've done in my career, that's probably up there in top 2 or 3 of like things I'm most proud of, because
right. Oh, Michael froze right in the middle of like a killer point. So we'll get back to it. He'll join and then we'll wrap up, everyone. So, all right, hold on. Maybe he's back already. So what we'll do, again, I think like one, I really appreciate everyone joining today. We're going to take one more question whenever he pops back in. Do me a favor, while we're taking a break now, hit the like button, hit the comments button, drop us your comments, tag yourself, because what ends up happening is these LinkedIn Lives are really difficult to find. So if you tag yourself or tag a few coworkers, it makes it a lot easier. But before you leave, make sure, again, you let us know what you thought. Michael's back. He's back in the mix now. So you're making a great point. And then, of course, dude, like every meeting, and then like, yeah, you're making a great point, and then your face always freezes like this. Like nobody's face ever freezes like with like the perfect angle. It's always like immediate. So cool, man. So I definitely want you to finish your point. Because I thought you were making a killer point.
Yeah, I just think like, how do you act as a leader in those moments? But when someone's actually behind, and I think that's really telling about your entire coaching program, because it's not just when things are going well, but when things aren't going well, and like, how do you act in that moment is really important. I think you also hit the nail on the head, the customized approach. Like each person is different, but you have to have a theory as to why. And then obviously like measuring the KPIs to that. But I think you have to know what's going on in the calls. You have to know specifically what's going on. And there's like, we discovered something, one person was behind because their email replies were off. Like they were doing something different that they weren't able to convince people through email as effectively as other people. But I didn't I came up with a theory as to why I thought that their performance was wrong. So now I have a hypothesis, and then I would go and try to prove it. And I changed that one variable, and now he's performing. So now we have a better idea to help the next person. It's all about building a picture for you as a coach on your team, and like what levers you can pull and what variables you change should have an effect on that overall performance. But you have to understand like why things are happening, and that's the gap that I'm seeing with leaders right now.
Yeah, well, you said something important, and I was listening to Tim Ferriss talked about this too. It's that you come up with, as a scientist, well, as a coach, a scientist, whatever, coder, it's all the same shit. Like you come up with hypotheses, but you look to falsify. You don't look to confirm.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the difference between most people in coaching scenarios is they're actually just looking to confirm their own opinions versus falsify. I'm constantly looking to falsify. I'm constantly being like, I have it wrong. So I'm not going to like steer. I'm not going to steer it that way.
Yeah.
I'm going to like let it, if that's where it goes, like directionally, I think I'm like not far off, but then dude, you and I probably have all been there where it's like, shit, like I was like completely off. So last question. I think this is a really, really good one. From Daniel Maurice Asmus. Hey, Jake, do you see many instances of reps who are just coast off minimal effort and save their true productivity when they're falling behind? How do you coach those reps to constantly get their best effort and reach a new plateau of performance? I'm going to double down on that. And I say, and the opposite, which is reps that are crushing it and at 120% and are like, I'm good. Like, thanks, dude. Go talk to Timmy. Uncle Timmy's the one who needs the like coaching, not me. So how do you deal with it when you have either a low performer or high performer? And how do you think about coaching differently to those folks?
Yeah, it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. And there's these personalities on every single team out there. So it's definitely a skill that you as a coach have to build. And particularly the last one is a tougher scenario for sure, I think. In one scenario, like the company, the person was the top performer, we discovered, because they were getting all the good leads. So that was an interesting one. So then they actually had to go through like a remedial like type program after that. So that was super interesting. I think that like if you're hitting your number and you're killing it, that's great. And I always like make that point, like that's great, but everyone has something to learn, and your close rates can even be better than they are today. And there's always room for improvement. And when you get to those top levels, that incremental improvement is like, usually those people are very financially motivated, or they're very like proud motivated. They want to be like the best.
Right.
And so I try to tap into one of those or figure out what the motivation of that specific person is. Like, hey, I know you want to achieve this. I did something like that maybe like 6 months ago, and I was astounded by this top performer's behavior. I said, we noticed this. It was like me and another leader. And I figured out that it was the pride thing. And it was like, oh shit, like you're talking behind my back about me. And I was like, well, I didn't mean for that to be pejorative, but it's working in my favor as the coach. He just went above and beyond on the like inspecting his own deals and like cleaning up the pipeline better and like actually implementing the coaching and training. Right. It was like amazing to watch. So I think like you really have to tap into that person's motivation and like view it as like a puzzle for yourself. Like, how am I going to get through this person? And I think like I kind of gamify it for myself so I don't beat myself up. I tend to be hard on myself in these situations. Like, oh, I can't get through to Bobby. Like, how can I do a better job there? So I think if you kind of view it as a puzzle piece for yourself and figuring out how to tap into people's motivations, it really helps out a lot. So that was a fun one for me.
I love that, dude. Yeah, those always feel good. Like, and you won't forget that one. Like, like you'll remember that. And I'll give kind of like my take is that you never know when someone's going to be open to coaching. And I think the key is like, I might have a conversation with Michael and say, hey man, like, I think there's some areas where I'd like to work with you. Like, do you want to be coached? And some top performers might say no. You're like, okay, well look. And I think the key is that you don't force it on people that don't want to be coached. If they don't want to be coached, like you've got the coachee is an equal participant in the relationship. Exactly. And I think that that's an important thing to understand. Like, we're not talking about you having to do all of this, but my big thing is whether they're a low performer or, you don't know when that one deal is going to punch them in the mouth. And then all of a sudden, like they're open for it. But if you shut the book on them, you'll miss those small things. And so my advice to everyone is just, Michael might, if we have this conversation, he might not be open now, but then maybe in 2 months he loses a big deal. And then I say, hey, hey man, so let's talk about this. Like, do you want to sit down and coach through the deal? Like maybe or talk about some areas of opportunity, and then boom, then it's open. So I just think don't write people off completely, but also spend time. There's actually stats that you should be spending your time with the middle. You should be like the upper middle. You shouldn't be spending your time with, there's a certain group of people, and it's not that you don't spend time with them, but how you spend your time is different. And when true coaching, which is skills development, there's, you got to kind of meet people where they're at too. And if they're not there, they're not there, and you can't force them to get there. And like, that's the unfortunate part about it, And so I think that's a really important point. So look, man, I know you're active. I know you love talking about this stuff. So we will, Kara, I know you're listening. So Kara, like, drop a link to Michael's profile. Definitely check out what he's doing on LinkedIn. Always talking about like great leadership. This is a fun conversation, dude. I feel like I like talking about coaching, and I like talking about this stuff because I feel like it's such a common misconception on what it is or what it isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And it of all the things I've done in my career, it's the topic that helps people the most. And I think like that's ultimately like the motivation for me and a lot of other people that I talk to that are passionate about this as well. And I think when you're kind of coming from that angle, it makes it really fun to also just watch people get better over time. And so it's a really fun topic for me.
Good, man. Well, look, I enjoyed it. Again, follow Michael on LinkedIn if you're not already. We had a little over 100 people tuning in at any given time, so we had a good little turnout. And again, make sure to tag yourself or some coworkers, especially any leaders you might have that you think would benefit from this conversation. I know a lot of startup leaders do not get the training that they need to be successful, and a lot of startup leaders do not get the development. And I really think like any sales leader who spends the hour to listen to this, I feel like you'll immediately up your game. You'll immediately maybe like think about some of those conversations differently. So thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll be back Monday, noon, same time live. And again, make sure to drop a quick like before you leave, and any other questions we'll try to get to down the road. But thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
All right. See you, man.